Good afternoon, Vallejo. We are here at the VCAT. You are watching VCAT, your hometown television station. This is Community Forum, and I am your host, Maria Bitagon. You can see our show on Channel 27 at Comcast or Channel 99 at AT&T Uverse. It's aired on Thursdays and Sundays at 6:30 p.m. We want to welcome all of you, but most importantly, I want to welcome my guest today. I'm so lucky to have the chief and also his sergeant here as my guest today. I will not introduce them. They will introduce themselves, and I will start with the chief.
Oh, well, thank you, and thank you for having us here today. My name is Andrew Bidou. I'm the chief of police here in Vallejo. I've been the chief now for about 4 years. Before Vallejo, I was in Benicia, and I was the chief there, and I was with the city of Benicia for about 7 years, but did the majority of my career in Newark, California, and had about 20 years there in law enforcement. I was born and raised in the area, and when I was growing up actually next door in Benicia, my father was the police chief of that town for a long period of time. And so this area, in general is, my home, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And you, Sergeant?
Thank you. I'm Brenton Garrick. I've been in the city of Vallejo approximately 47 years. I've pretty much been raised in this city. Been an officer with the city of Vallejo. This is my 29th year. So I attended Vallejo schools here. Wow. Made a lot of friends here. I still have quite a bit of family here. And it's been a pleasure to serve this city and grow up in this city.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming today. I am always very interested in knowing about the police, police department, because of the age in which we're living. I think you guys are so very important in providing the background that that the city will have, whatever kind of background, positive background that the city will have. So I would like to ask you some questions.
Sure.
About the things that are happening in the city of Vallejo. And I would, first of all, would like to address recruiting. What is the current state of the police department and staffing levels? What recruitment challenges has the department faced over the last few years, as well as what do you anticipate in the future?
Well, so our authorized strength, which means how many sworn officers we have budgeted for our department, is 122. We are right now hovering in, we're right about 111, and then we have about 8 to 9 in various forms of recruitment and training. One of the biggest obstacles for everybody in recruiting right now is that it takes a long time to train a police officer. So if we hire somebody without experience, they typically go through a 3 to 4 month process to get hired. Then they go to a 6-month academy, and then they have another 6 months of field training. And so it's about a 1.5 year process, which is pretty long. And then there's a certain percentage of people that just don't make it. So we invest in somebody for a long period of time, sometimes just to find out that they're not suited for the position, and then we have to start all over again. Statewide, I will tell you, recruiting for law enforcement is one of the biggest issues that we talk about at the chief level. And there's a variety of reasons. One, it's a very tough job right now. I mean, anybody that turns on the news, understands the scrutiny and the sort of current environment. And that's been going on for several years. So I think you have a younger generation that, the job isn't quite as appealing as it was, that I think it was for me. I won't speak for Sergeant Garrick, but, I think we both were, drawn to it when we were younger. I don't know that you have that level of enthusiasm anymore. And then there's some other sort of issues that we've had with contracts and whatnot that have been cleared up. But I'm very excited to say that our recruiting has picked up significantly probably in the last few months. And as long as we can maintain a high number of the people that we're hiring, which I believe that we will be able to, I think we're looking very well in that regard.
That is so great to know. And when you talk about the changing times? I mean, that really factors in the equation, huh?
I believe so. You know, I mean, I'm showing my age here a little bit because I know when I started, you know, the old timers, which would be considered Sergeant Garrick and I, you know, they would say, you know, this new generation isn't like our generation, and so, you know, and so now we feel like we're kind of the older generation, and there tends to be sort of a different needs, different wants from this new generation. That oftentimes doesn't sort of coincide with the job of law enforcement, and so you know, you're coming into a kind of a tenure-based position, and because of seniority and tenure, when you're new, you're working weekends and nights all night long for you know, many years before you get the opportunity to you know, kind of work quote-unquote normal hours. And so it's kind of interesting. When I look back when I was younger, I thought that was actually kind of neat, right? I was staying up all night, and you know, I didn't understand how hard it was until I did it. But I think the younger generation, and with social media and sort of the instancy of information, you know, it's a long haul when you begin in law enforcement. And I don't know that, you know, that necessarily aligns itself with the views and desires of most of our younger generation now.
And how about you? How does it hit you? So
you know, like the chief has indicated, there's been some change. It just seems like the profession seemed a little more noble when we first entered into the profession. And coming from a you know, a military family, and I know the chief has a military background, you know, it was a level of service that you felt that you wanted to give your community, you know, as well as society itself. And that's not so much the case now. You know, we look at some of the reasons of people wanting to enter into law enforcement, and they're quite different than our reasons when we first intended to get into the profession. So, you know, that's what's interesting. And then we have, you know, some individuals that come into the profession thinking that they can be a detective right away. Well, no, like the chief indicated, it takes years to work up to that level and gain that expertise. So, you know, tenure, so you have to start kind of at the bottom, you know, working patrol division and graveyard shifts and the long hours, and gain that expertise and training, and over time, you know, it's a promotional process.
Yes, thank you for your answer. I'm interested in the budget. So we have this thing called participatory budgeting in Vallejo. And the police department received some funds this year from the participatory budgeting program. What is the funding being used for, coming from participatory budgeting?
You know, we just had monies that was allocated through participatory budgeting, and we have a virtual system which we house on Mare Island. It's a virtual, I almost want to call it 5D, but it's a 5-screen, and basically it's a training tool for our officers in the use of force, and when to properly use weapons, but most importantly it's a de-escalation tool that we're really trying to emphasize with our staff, because that's become the norm in our profession, so that we don't have to resort to any type of violence. As a result of that, we have also introduced, there's been opportunities where we introduce that to the public as well. We have our Chiefs Advisory Board, which in about a month or so will be bringing them through the system so they can see the split-second decisions that officers are faced with every day, and therefore gain a better understanding of you know, the rigors of our job, as well as the procedures and policies that we have to follow.
Okay, so what about you, participatory budgeting? How do you feel about this, and how it affects your, you know, your funding?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's hugely impactful on our funding. However, we benefited from the process for sure at the police department. You know, aside from, you know, a regular, you know, general fund budget for the police department is very strong. So we have money. You know, in time we're going to need to add more officers here, so that will have to grow as the numbers of our personnel grow. But for our current funding provides for, we employ state-of-the-art equipment. We have a very robust training program. I believe that we invest very heavily in our current personnel, which is important. But over the years since I've been here, we have been successful as a recipient from participatory budgeting. We bought that virtual machine before I got here, so it was about 5 years ago or so. And just like anything else with technology, you know, I mean, it's funny, I keep thinking about this, our cell phones, you know, it seems like we have to replace them every couple of years. And so this was due for a substantial upgrade that was quite expensive. And so because it was voted on and we were awarded those funds, we were able to update that at a pretty significant cost that didn't come out of, you know, our general fund budget. And so that was really important to us. Yeah. I just wanted to emphasize one thing that Sergeant Garrick started to talk about is, you know, it's been down because it needed this upgrade. It's actually, I think last week is back up and running from this latest upgrade. But we started doing quarterly community days there, and so we're always finding different ways to bring community members in front of this, because like I said, I mean, if you look on TV, you know, there's a lot of controversy over police use of force. Mm-hmm. And I think as, you know, a society, we've become very accustomed to watching videos in TV, and we sort of have a false sense how real life actually plays out. Mm-hmm. And this gives, you know, community members an opportunity to go through there and see it and actually have to react to it. And, you know, they walk away with a different understanding. I don't think we've had anybody that's gone through there that hasn't really expressed kind of their gratitude, but their lack of understanding prior to doing this, and walked away with sort of a whole new thought about the way that force is employed in the field. And so that's been helpful for us to help educate the community too.
That is really great. So we have participatory budgeting now, about grant funding. Has the police department had any success attaining additional funding through grants?
Yeah, I mean, I would say over the last 4 years, I mean, that's been one of our highlights. So after I was here about a year, we actually got, in terms of financial support per position, the largest COPS grant in the United States, which
wow.
was quite awesome, yeah. And so without getting into all the details, they only fund a certain level for each person, yes. Unless you apply for a waiver and they pay the whole salary. We were the only city in the country that they actually paid the full salary for, so that was quite significant. Throughout other areas of our department, and particularly community outreach, we've had a couple that have helped us in the tune of about $500,000 a year. That has helped us support a lot of our programs like Midnight Basketball and a whole lot of things. But honestly, I'm going to let Sergeant Garrick talk about this a little bit, because he's been instrumental in us achieving these grants, and he's been kind of on the front line and has done a lot of work. So we've been the benefactor to this. So I feel sort of like you know, he should be talking about it, because he's just been terrific in this area. And so,
yeah, well, thank you, Chief. You know, what it's allowed us to do, I mean, the bulk of the money came through the Board of State and Community Corrections. So okay. These were state grants. Our first award, like the Chief mentioned, was a little under $500,000. And what it allowed us to do was, rather than use general funds to support overtime activities for officers to attend events, we actually had state monies which allowed us to do the same thing. And that kind of opened the door. I mean, you know, if we gauge the last 3 or 4 years, on average, we have been doing about 400, just under 400 community engagement activities a year. And that's a combination of outreach activities, meetings, tabling events, which in essence brings us to the table at these community events and makes us visible to the community. And as a result of that's where networking comes in. People are able to come to us and ask questions that maybe they've had for months that they didn't want to contact us on 911 for. Yes. So this is an opportunity for us to network with them. It's also an opportunity for the community to network amongst themselves. So it's been, you know, a huge success. You know, and under this chief, he's been a real advocate of us being out there in the community, with the main goal being educating the public. We have to educate the public about what we do, because that wasn't always the case. And under this chief and these grants, we've been able to do just that.
One
I'm
other
yes.
aspect I think is important to mention is, in this grant that Sergeant Garrick was just talking about in other ones, is there's a community component to it. And so really, when we apply for these grants, we also do that on behalf of some community partners, and some of the money is basically a pass-through. It comes through us to them. And so what that does is it ensures our partnership with other groups in the community. And so, you know, we've been able to, like, I mean, everybody knows about the late night basketball,
Yes.
but we're working with other groups to do after-school tutoring for
Yes.
kids in school, other athletic programs, I mean, just a whole host of activities. And so that's been actually a very important component to this as well.
What I love about your coffee clutches is that it is a more, you know, it's an event which is really relaxed,
Right.
and they can talk to you and laugh with you, you know, in comparison to when they encounter a police person and there's something that's wrong.
Right.
Right.
And that is really very positive.
Right.
It is.
I love that.
Right.
You know, and you have been to all of this, and I have seen some of your events also that you have done you have done quite a few, and that really makes a lot of difference in the people's perception of the role of policemen and
Right.
policewomen.
It's also helpful for us as well, and so people thank us all the time for being where we are, and we always turn the tables and thank them, because if you think about kind of, you know, a police officer's life, if you will, they end up the majority of their time dealing with sort of other people's emergencies and their problems. And so they're not, you know, even though they're driving around in the community, they're not necessarily exposed to the community as whole throughout their shift. And so it's a good event for our officers to interact with the public on a different sort of wavelength too. And so it's equally as beneficial for us.
Well, I'm glad it's good for both. And I'm looking at the future issues for law enforcement. What do you think are the future issues, or are there any things that you think that you would like to achieve more, or what are the things which you have already achieved that you have, you know, the things that's very important for you guys to finish, you know?
Well, I'll say a couple things, and then I'll let Brent kind of finish up. You know, I mean, the current climate we're in terms of, you know, if you think about the future, it's our present and continues to be our future, is how society and police kind of evolve to work together in the future. That's been kind of a changing model, you know, over the last 10 years, more so than I think, you know, I've been along, Brent and I have about the same tenure, and I think that he would agree, you know, our first 20 years, you know, it didn't feel like so much change. The last 10 years there's been a lot of change, and
Yes.
so, and I think that'll continue and even speed up. I think technology plays a really big piece in that, and so, you know, whatever this new piece of technology is out there that we have no idea, it's going to affect us in probably different ways, and so then all sort of the side issues that come along with that, in terms of, you know, community relations, community contact, the role of police in society, that's continuing to evolve, and then, you know, recruiting. And so, you know, how do we bring kind of this new young person that has certain expectations about a or workplace, and then get them, you know, to understand and participate in a system that runs a little bit differently than maybe most jobs. And so, you know, those are continuing challenges for us.
Okay, well, let me get back to the budget. Is the police department budget adequately funded to cover community needs? I want to do. Is the police department budget adequately funded to cover community needs?
Absolutely. And so, like, I talked a little bit about it earlier in our interview, you know, for me, you know, sort of traditionally when the economy was bad and everybody was cutting services everywhere. I mean, Vallejo is kind of an extreme example of that because of bankruptcy.
Yes.
But the other two agencies I was at, we were, you know, cutting as well, maybe not to the degree that Vallejo did. But what a lot of agencies did, the first thing they do is they cut their training budget.
Oh.
And so, you know, if you think about sort of how that works in the budget process, you know, managers try and trim everything to keep the positions, right? But I think what we found is you know, and absolutely, I mean, that needs to be a goal to protect those positions because that's where the service is. But after time, you have people in positions and then you're not giving them the tools, the material, and the training they need to perform adequately. And so then the performance drops a little bit. And so, like I said, over time, you know, the police departments can have to grow in numbers, and certainly we've been on track to do that. But we also have to invest sort of on the thing that every part that the public doesn't see. We need to make sure that we have state-of-the-art equipment. We need to make sure that they're getting state-of-the-art contemporary training because things change out in the real world much faster than generally organizations can adapt to. And in that sort of gap is where, you know, a lot of things can happen that we want to avoid. And so for our staffing now, we're funded very well.
Okay, that's great. If you are going to, let's say we're in an event where, you know, it's like a coffee clutch, or where this event is a little bit more serious because of the things that are happening and the things that the adjustments that we have to make. Could you please talk to your constituents, to the police constituents? What kind of help, what kind of cooperation do we need so that we can get all the cooperation we need, so that we can look at Vallejo and say, hey, we have a chance to get up there?
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, in the last few years, I think we made tremendous strides in not only law enforcement, in a lot of different ways in the city of Vallejo. And I'm very optimistic about our future. But what I would tell anybody is get involved. You know, find out what interests you and get involved. One of our biggest programs, you know, a lot of the questions for law enforcement turn to be about safety. And so, you know, our #1 recommendation is join a neighborhood watch. You know, that puts you in touch with us. And it gives you an avenue to communicate with us, but more importantly, it puts you in touch with your neighbors, and you can do, you establish a local network that looks after things, and we've seen this help neighborhoods time and time again in Vallejo. I want to say when I started here, I'm not going to get these numbers exactly right, but I want to say, you know, we were in under 100 groups of neighborhood watch, and we're up to about 350 now. So we have grown exponentially. And with that, we've seen tremendous success in all types of ways in terms of safety. And so that's what I would say, get involved. But if you're looking for, you know, how to make your area safer, I think Neighborhood Watch is the best way to start.
I would like you guys, so we have a lot of events that we talked about, and I'd like you to talk about all these events that are coming so that we can make the people of Vallejo aware, so that they can participate and so that they will have some time to actually absorb the things that are changing, and also so that they can have a more positive view of how we can help in that area. And I have a lot of events here. So would you like to talk about those?
You know, I'm going to let actually Sergeant Garrick. So Sergeant Garrick's job at the police department is coordinating this specific effort. And so this is what he does full time. He's amazing at it.
Yes.
He doesn't want us, you know, he doesn't want everybody to know, but both of us are getting, you know, closer to the end of our career. But
Don't say that.
Yeah, I know. But his roots here, I mean, you heard it in his introduction, his roots here in Vallejo, you know, are just significant. And so, you know, his care and compassion for this community is really second to none. And so he's been kind of the tip of our spear, if you will. And so I'm going to let you talk about all this stuff, right?
Our events.
Yeah, you know, most of the events that we do sponsor and participate in are advertised on our social media pages. So it pays to log into our Facebook site and look at our calendar events. As an example, this coming weekend we have our Carnival with the Cops, in which we'll have bicycle repair, we'll have basketball hoops, we have some games that will be set up for the youth. And that's one example of us, you know, opening our doors to the public. It'll be held in our parking lot right next to the police department. As a matter of routine, like you've mentioned, we have our Coffee with the Cops, which we've been doing bi-monthly. We try to randomize that and bring it to different areas around the city. So we service north, east, west, and south by trying to strategically place them in different locations, as well as putting them at different times to make them accessible to the public. As we get into the winter months, you know, we have, I won't say too much about it, but we have a book program that we're going to introduce to the Vallejo School District. And we'll have some details on our Facebook page about that. It'll be a really neat program, an outreach program for some of the young people attending schools. And then we have, you know, things like our gun buyback event, which will be held at the fairgrounds in November, and our Shop with the Cop event that's coming up in December, in which we partner with one of the local stores and give gifts to some of the needy people within our community. So a lot of events, and like I said, we advertise them on our Facebook page, we put them out to local media, and we've had a lot of success with partners who are willing to partner with us to make things happen for the community.
So could you please give a telephone number and or an email where people can get in touch with you so that they will be knowledgeable of these events?
Sure.
And yeah,
people in the community are always encouraged to contact me. Again, I'm Sergeant Brenton Garrick. Phone number is 707-648-4361, and that's a number they can call me anytime to find out what's happening within the city and you know, what we're involved in.
okay. So now that we have come to the end of this program, I am so glad that you came today.
Thank you
so much. And if there's anything that VCAT can do to help any of the things that you want to promote to the public, so that they can have a better understanding of the role of the police department, please don't hesitate to call.
Appreciate it.
And would you like to address for the last time, you know, your police constituents?
So I just want to say, on behalf of the Vallejo Police Department, you know, if you're interested in what we do, if you're interested in your neighborhood, please reach out to us and get involved. We're here to partner with you and work together to make Vallejo a better place.
So thank you very much for coming, Chief.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.